Well, I thank the gentlelady from South Carolina, particularly for her shout out to the National Guard from her home state that has been deployed to the District of Columbia. Unfortunately, that has been necessary, and I'm proud of the president for trying to make sure that we secure the nation's capital. And they are one of the many National Guard units that have been deployed to do the job that the people of D.C. should be doing if they were competent and if they were doing what they're supposed to do as the nation's capital. But the president is taking charge, and he's leading to ensure that our nation's capital is safe for the American people to come visit. I would note that, relatedly, when you're talking about the state of law enforcement and the state of the security of the American people, we've heard a lot of criticisms from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, both in the House and the Senate, and generally around the country, directed at the great men and women of ICE, the law enforcement agency that is dedicated to the task of removing illegal aliens, and in particular, dangerous illegal aliens from the streets of the United States of America according to the law, particularly focusing and targeting those individuals. I believe the number is around 1.5 million people who are currently in the United States under orders of removal. That is, they've gone through the process. Judges in this country have ordered the removal of 1.5 million people, and ICE is tasked with removing them. And hundreds of thousands of them are dangerous individuals who have committed crimes in their home countries, who are trafficking narcotics, and have been engaging in criminal behavior in the United States of America. And what do my Democratic colleagues do? They stand up in defense of criminals, of criminal illegal aliens, and in constant attack of the men and women of ICE. Let's just go through some recent criticisms of the people, of the great men and women who are working for ICE. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz smeared ICE officers as, quote, a threat to the public, called ICE reckless, suggested the state is at war with federal officers and under attack by ICE, and smeared ICE as, quote, the modern-day Gestapo. California Governor Gavin Newsom likened ICE to secret police, calling them authoritarian and calling the people to, quote, push back. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker claimed ICE is turning the country into Nazi Germany. New York Governor Kathy Hochul accused ICE of terrorizing people. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro claimed ICE officers are, quote, making our neighborhoods less safe. Minnesota Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan said ICE officers cause chaos and terror. Senator Chuck Schumer declared that ICE does not belong in our neighborhoods. Senator Tina Smith called ICE, quote, a clear and present threat. Senator John Hickenlooper smeared ICE as a reign of terror. Senator Jeff Merkley likened ICE operations to fascism and claimed officers are doing nothing but terrorizing our communities. Senator Bernie Sanders asked people to, quote, stop ICE from what they are doing as soon as possible. Senator Elizabeth Warren claimed ICE is, quote, intentionally stoking fear and tearing communities apart. Senator Ruben Gallegos said ICE exists, quote, to scare the American public. Senator Mark Warner equated ICE officers to a brutal dictator. Senator Dick Blumenthal accused ICE of spreading lawlessness and recklessness. Senator Alex Padilla accused ICE of indiscriminate violence. Senator Dick Durbin accused ICE of officers of committing atrocities. Representative Ilhan Omar said ICE is, quote, state violence, called officers, quote, vile and beyond cruel, and stated, quote, abolishing ICE is not enough, end quote. Representative Pramila Jayapal called ICE officers, quote, deranged, accused them of, quote, kidnapping, and said, quote, resistance to ICE is, quote, inspiring, and claimed ICE officers will, quote, shoot at you and kill you, end quote. Representative Eric Swalwell smeared ICE officers, quote, masked thugs, called them, quote, terrorizing bandits, said it was his priority to ensure officers are, quote, no longer faceless, compared them to the KGB and demanded they, quote, stay the F out of California, end quote. Representative Jasmine Crockett compared ICE to, quote, slave patrols and called them thugs. Representative Delia Ramirez said ICE is the single biggest threat to public safety right now. I want to repeat. She said ICE is the single biggest threat to public safety right now and attacked ICE as a terror force. Representative Summer Lee said ICE is out of control and a police state. Representative Ayanna Pressley called ICE a rogue, violent agency that has no business in our communities and must be abolished, and accused ICE of terrorizing our communities. Representative April McLean Delaney called ICE lawless. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called ICE, quote, an anti-civilian force, and they should not exist. Representative Rashida Tlaib said ICE is, quote, terrorizing our communities and, quote, turning our country into a fascist police state, calling it a rogue agency and calling it for it to be abolished. Representative Julie Johnson excused violence against ICE as people, quote, channeling that frustration. Representative Laura Friedman said ICE officers are, quote, terrorizing our friends and neighbors and bringing chaos and violence to our streets. I've got dozens more of these that I can continue to fill time on the House floor going through the absolute vitriolic attacks on the people of ICE. Literally another 30 in the list that I could read off. That is what is occurring on a daily basis, being directed at the people of ICE. Now, I want to give you a tale of two choices. I want you to look at and make a decision here about who you want to focus on. Over here, we have victims of dangerous illegal aliens that were in the United States of America. Over here, we have 5 Americans who are no longer with us. We have Kayla Hamilton, a 20-year-old woman with autism living in Aberdeen, Maryland, who was savagely strangled to death by an illegal alien MS-13 gang member released by Biden at the border. We have Sergeant Brandon Mendoza, a 13-year Mesa Police Department veteran who was struck by a previously convicted illegal alien who was drunk when he struck Brandon, that gentleman from Arizona. We have, somewhat probably most infamously, Laken Hope Riley. Riley was a 22-year-old nursing student who attended Augusta University, was killed by a Tren de Aragua gang member who illegally paroled into the country under Joe Biden. We have Rachel Marin, a 37-year-old Maryland mother of 5 who was raped and murdered while going out for a walk by an illegal alien who snuck across the border under Biden. And we have Jocelyn Nungare, a woman whose mother I've gotten to know, a woman whose mother I invited to join us at the inauguration of President Trump a year ago because of her courage for standing up and calling out the lawlessness of people who have been released on the streets of this country that resulted in the death of her daughter, Jocelyn. Jocelyn was a 12-year-old girl in Houston who was out for a walk when 2 Venezuelan illegal aliens released under Biden forced under a bridge and forced her to take off her clothes before she was savagely killed in Houston, Texas, my home state. And you want to know what? Their lives mattered. Those individuals' lives mattered. And my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, whether they're in this chamber or in the other chamber or in state houses across this country, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to ignore what has happened to these 5 Americans, by the way, who are simply the faces of hundreds of thousands of Americans who have lost their lives violently through narcotics, through fentanyl, through drunk drivers, through murder, through rape, through intimidation. They represent a large block of Americans suffering at the hands of people who have been released on our streets purposely for crass political purposes by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And the fact is, that has left us with a current situation that is even worse. And I'm going to go through a few more, and then I want to bring my colleagues into this conversation. Here behind me, after all of the eruption over what has occurred in Minnesota, where there's been a lot of vitriol being directed at ICE in Minnesota, let us look at these individuals right here, which represent about 18 individuals that are the people that ICE have been arresting in Minnesota. So a lot of news over one incident in Minnesota. And what we have here are a Somalian illegal alien convicted of homicide. We have a Salvadoran illegal alien convicted of 3 counts of homicide with a deportation order since June of 25. We have a Mexican illegal convicted of homicide who was previously deported in 2002. We have a Sudanese illegal alien convicted of homicide. We have a Laotian illegal alien convicted of 2 counts of homicide with a deportation order since 2009. We have an illegal alien from Sierra Leone convicted of 2 counts of homicide with a deportation order since 2022. We have a Mexican illegal alien convicted of homicide with a deportation order since 2015. We have a Somalian illegal alien convicted of manslaughter with a deportation order since 2022. We have a Sudanese illegal alien convicted of attempt to commit homicide, weapon possession, and DUI. A Guatemalan illegal alien convicted of negligent homicide with a vehicle and DUI with a deportation order since 2022. A Burmese illegal alien convicted of negligent homicide. Another Laotian illegal alien convicted of a strong-arm rape of a 12-year-old girl and kidnapping a child with intent to sexually assault her, with a deportation order since 2024. A Laotian illegal alien convicted of strong-arm rape, aggravated assault with a weapon, and strangulation with a deportation order since 2012. A Laotian illegal alien convicted of rape and child fondling with a deportation order since 2003. A Laotian illegal alien convicted of rape with a weapon, and sexual assault with a deportation order since 1996. Mexican illegal alien convicted of sexual assault of a child and DUI with a deportation order since 2016. A Laotian illegal alien convicted of strong-arm sodomy of a boy, a strong-arm sodomy of a girl with a deportation order since 2018. A Laotian illegal alien convicted of sexual assault and sodomy of a girl under age 13 and procuring a child for prostitution with a deportation order since 2006. These are the individuals in Minnesota that ICE, who are being attacked, criticized, demonized by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, those individuals went out, risked their lives, put their lives on the line to remove these people from our streets so that our children might be safe, so that our families might be safe. No, I'm not going to apologize for ICE. No, I'm not going to join in the bandwagon of criticisms against ICE. Yes, you review procedures. Yes, you make sure you do things by the book and that people have due process. But let's remember, when we're talking about people who are on our streets as guests of our country, and they're committing violence against the people of our country, we have a duty to remove them, deport them, and do it immediately and swiftly. Let's flip the page real quick. Couple more. Let's look beyond just Minnesota. Because remember, when you have dangerous people in places like Minnesota and lawless states like California and New York, where you have sanctuary cities, then there are dangerous people throughout our country too. This is just the worst of the worst from yesterday. Just yesterday, in Virginia, a 20-year-old citizen of Guatemala was convicted for possessing obscene material of a minor and filming child porn. In my home state of Texas, a criminal illegal alien from Mexico was convicted for aggravated assault of a family member in Harris County. In New York, a criminal illegal alien from Jamaica was convicted for burglary. A criminal illegal alien from Mexico was convicted for burglary. And a criminal illegal alien from El Salvador was convicted for false imprisonment and battery. Now, that was just yesterday. Now, let's look real quick at the worst of the worst from 2025 generally, not just yesterday. In Louisiana, a sexual predator, an illegal alien from Honduras, whose criminal history includes active warrants for 394 counts of pornography involving juveniles and 2 counts of sexual abuse of an animal. In Kansas, a violent criminal illegal alien from Mexico was sentenced to 20 years in prison for 1 count of forcible assault on a federal officer after he violently punched an ICE officer and attempted to strangle the officer with his own badge cord. In Virginia, an Afghan national who entered the United States under Joe Biden's, quote, Operation Allies Welcome, provided support to the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and his father is a commander of a militia group in Afghanistan. In Nebraska, an illegal alien from Honduras and a leader of MS-13, also known as Phantasma, wanted in his home country for a quadruple homicide. After being charged with firearms charges in Honduras, he allegedly bribed his way out of jail and illegally entered the United States. In Houston, a criminal illegal alien from El Salvador, whose criminal history includes convictions for sexual assault of a child under 17, multiple DUIs, child fondling, and illegally re-entering the United States, already previously. When ICE conducted an enforcement operation in November to arrest him, he brutally beat an ICE officer with a metal coffee cup, causing a severe laceration to the officer's mouth and burns to the officer's face. Now, where are my Democratic colleagues concerned about the ICE officer who put his life on the line and gets mauled and has a laceration across his face because he's trying to stop murderers and rapists and child pornographers from being on American streets? In my home state of Texas, Jose Alfredo Zeta, a criminal illegal alien from Mexico, operated a dental clinic and performed dental procedures on patients despite not having a license for more than 20 years. His clinic was uncovered after one of his former patients reported he was convicted of Dentistry Act violation and indecent assault. Another criminal illegal alien and his family members ran a sex trafficking operation where they would approach women and girls, some as young as 14, and lure them to the United States under promises of jobs. That's all these people right here. That's these people right here. A criminal illegal alien from Vietnam, convicted 25 times for crimes: possession, controlled substance, second-degree robbery, cruelty toward the elderly, arson, property, taking vehicle without consent, and theft. I could go on and on. Those are the people that ICE are trying to get off of our streets. And here's the question. This is what I want to open up for conversation. My good friend from Pennsylvania, Scott Perry, a great American, somebody I'm proud to serve with here in this Congress, proud to serve in the House Freedom Caucus. And I'd like to yield some time in colloquy with my friend from Pennsylvania about how he views whose side are we on. That's what I want to know. Whose side are we on? Are we on the side of American citizens, Americans, including some immigrants and immigrant families like beautiful Jocelyn Nungare? Are we on their side? Or Officer Mendoza? Or are we on the side of violent criminals that ICE is trying to remove from our streets? Because it sure seems like my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are on their side. They're on the bad guys' side. There really are white hats and black hats, and you have to choose. They're on the bad guys' side. Not standing with ICE, not standing with law enforcement, not standing up to defend the law enforcement, putting their lives on the line to keep these guys off our streets so that these Americans aren't killed. And I just wonder if my friend from Pennsylvania has a similar view, that it ought to be easy to choose sides. And if my friend from Pennsylvania, like me, chooses to side with Border Patrol and ICE and law enforcement and local law enforcement to protect Americans against violent thugs and criminals on our streets.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Texas, and I surely appreciate his passion. It is well deserved, and I'm so heartbroken for our country. In the past, Democrats and Republicans, we might not have agreed on maybe the path to get to where we were going, how we were going to do it, sometimes not even where we were going, but we loved our country and we understood what our job was here, to support and represent America. How is it, how can it be that we live in a society, people say, I'm sure they say it to you, Chip, you're so divided. Why can't you people in Washington, D.C. get along? They say to me, Representative, why can't you work with your colleagues on the other side of the aisle? And I want to. We look for every opportunity to. And I'm going to just tell you, look, I'm going to call it the way I see it because my eyes aren't lying. My friends on the other side of the aisle will tell you, will tell everybody, will try and get pictures. We stand with law enforcement. We stand with the police. We support them. Whatever they need, we're there. And they want to convince you of that because, of course, as law-abiding American citizens, it's the right thing to do. Representative Roy, when I was growing up, if there was a criminal running down the street and an officer was chasing him, somebody would be a good Samaritan and stick their leg out or say he went that way and help out. But we're literally living in some dystopia where they say somehow it's different because it's ICE. It's different because we can say ICE. Immigration and Custom Enforcement. It's no different. These officers are no different than your local township police, the state police, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, the U.S. Marshals, the good guys. That's who they are. And my colleagues on the other side of the aisle literally are defending these people that came here to murder, rape, and rob. That's who they're defending. They're literally defending you. There's no other way to cut it. Rachel Marin died about 30 miles from my house. I don't live close to the Texas border. This is everywhere. Representative Roy and I both have daughters, 12 years old. Jocelyn Nungaray was 12 years old and was heinously murdered by two people allowed to come and stay here illegally. These are animals that did this.
Gang members, Tren de Aragua gang members, that took her under a bridge in Houston, Texas for the last moments of her life, raping her and killing her. And her beautiful mother today is standing up saying, enough, enough. We should enforce our laws. We should stand with law enforcement against the thugs and the gang members that are killing Americans, including Jocelyn and Officer Mendoza and Laken Riley and Rachel Marin and Kayla Hamilton. And why do I know their names? Because I've met their families and I've talked to them. And they're human beings. They were Americans who were living their lives and going to college and going to school and serving their country. And they're dead because people decided for political purposes they wanted to flood our streets with gang members from Venezuela and criminals instead of protecting Americans.
You're right, Chip. There are the good guys, and unfortunately there are the bad guys. There just are. No one would think, I just try and put it in any context I can. If I'm driving down the highway and I see a police officer that has pulled somebody over for a traffic infraction, I don't stop and get involved and say, well, what's going on here, officer? How do you know? What do you think you're doing? I don't understand why people that are getting involved in law enforcement activities don't understand that they are obstructing justice. Pulling in front of immigration and custom enforcement officials that are trying to remove people from our country that are here illegally, that have had their due process, is not acceptable in any matter, shape, or form. There is no one here that will do more to defend your First Amendment liberties to protest and seek redress from your government. 100%. But ladies and gentlemen, protesting does not mean impeding law enforcement. It does not mean blocking streets. It does not mean getting on an app on your phone that is supported by George Soros to track immigration and custom enforcement, law enforcement officers, the law enforcement police, and track them down and impede their work to keep everybody else in the community safe. You know what that is, Representative Roy? I've got the definition right here. That is sedition, is what that is. That's exactly what it is. No one wants to say it, but we're seeing it happen. And this is among Americans in our country. These are our neighbors. These are people right here in every town that somehow think that suddenly it's okay. And now there's unfortunately been a death. The death that happened recently is so tragic and unfortunate. That Miss Good, who lost her life, She could have protested peacefully and sought redress for the things that she thinks it's wrong about her government that should be changed. But she made a decision to inject herself into law enforcement and impede law enforcement and make it a dangerous circumstance where an officer of the law had to make a split-moment decision about his life and also the lives of other people in his community. Ladies and gentlemen, Representative Roy, immigration and custom enforcement officials live in your town. They're just like the township cop that you know that stands by your school in the morning when your kids are getting off the bus. They are the same people. They are the same people. How is it that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle can somehow make book and tell you that you must support violent murderers, rapists, robbers, gang members, drug traffickers, human traffickers? It couldn't be more black and white, and it is so disappointing.
And what we're talking about, again, at the risk of repetition, a Somalian illegal alien convicted of homicide, a Salvadorian illegal alien convicted of 3 counts of homicide, a Mexican illegal convicted of homicide, a Sudanese illegal alien convicted of homicide, a Laotian illegal alien convicted of 2 counts of homicide, and I could go through all 18 again. These are violent individuals. These were all on the streets of Minnesota. The Minnesota ICE was on the streets trying to track down these people. And the radical left, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, want to side with these guys.
I just got to ask you in this colloquy, Representative Roy from Texas, you say the radical left, but I listened to you rattle off the statements of elected officials, not just members of Congress, members of the United States Senate, governors of states, including the one that I come from. Is this the radical left, or is this our Democrat colleagues on the other side of the aisle? Which one of our Democrat colleagues from the other side of the aisle, whether at the federal level, the state, or local level, has come out to denounce the treatment by law enforcement at the hands of these people that are trying to thwart them and put their lives in danger for the sake of murderers? Which ones? Do you know of any?
I've not heard one. But I've heard, and I read 30 of them before. And how about Boston Mayor Michelle Wu comparing ICE officers to a neo-Nazi group? Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson accusing ICE of being, quote, secret police who are terrorizing our communities and a lawless racist force. New York City's Zohran Mamdani said ICE enforcement is an attack on us all. New Jersey State Senator Brittany Timberlake threatened that ICE officers will find themselves in the same position as those who carried out the illegal acts in Nazi Germany.
It is so
That's an elected
outrageous.
official in New Jersey. Minneapolis City Council member Robin Wansley claimed ICE is carrying out terrorist attacks. I could go on, and they're then calling on people to go out and attack ICE. And by the way, the man that was engaged in that incident in Minnesota, and they'll review all of that, he was dragged by a previous protester down the street in a car. I read a minute ago the ICE officer who was lacerated across his face when one of these thugs attacked him with a steel coffee mug. I talked about another guy that had his cord wrapped around his neck. They tried to get him. One of these guys did that to an ICE officer. Where is the concern for our law enforcement? My grandfather was the chief of police of a small town in West Texas back in the 1940s. Where's the concern for them? My great-great-grandfather was a Texas Ranger. I was proud to be in the U.S. Attorney's Office, proud to be the first Assistant Attorney General, proud to work with law enforcement. Does every member of law enforcement always get it right? No. They're human beings. Do we have ways to go through and punish and rectify and review and ensure due process and that rights are protected? Yes. Should we? Yes. But I want to remind people, these are not American citizens. These are guests in our home who are abusing that invitation, or non-invitation to the extent that they were legally here, invitation to the extent they overstayed a visa, invitation to the extent they're abusing a visa that they were issued. But for whatever reason that they're here, they are violating that trust and engaging in illegal activity and carrying out the sickest and most heinous crimes. And it cannot be allowed to proceed, and we cannot allow people to side against our law enforcement that are trying to keep our streets safe so that we don't lose Rachel Marin, and we don't lose Laken Riley, and we don't lose Kayla Hamilton, and we don't lose Officer Mendoza, and we don't lose Jocelyn Nungare.
Representative Roy, you and I have stood in this chamber countless times for countless hours having the same discussion over the same people in this picture, over and over. And there are countless others that aren't here. Died from drunk driving incidents, died from drug overdose, human trafficked, lives destroyed forever if they've got to stay alive, if they even had that opportunity to stay alive. There's so much outrage from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, yet I can't remember, and so I'm going to ask you, Representative Roy from Texas, I can't remember one time my colleagues on the other side of the aisle came to talk about Laken Riley, Rachel Marin, Jocelyn Nungare, the officer, the young lady. Not one.
I can't, in totally objectively, I've been to this floor, I come to this floor a lot, I watch the House floor, I do not remember a single incident, a single time in my 7 years of being in the United States House of Representatives, not once have I seen it. Now, I might have missed one, in fairness. Maybe somebody will find it in the record. But I've been down here countless times when it's attacks on law enforcement, countless times when it's an attack on President Trump and this administration. And I think this really matters. I'm going to ask you another question I think is important. Why are these people here? Why are these gang and thug members here? Why? Was it President Trump?
No.
Did President Trump put them on our streets?
President Trump did not. President Trump is credited with having the most secure border in history.
And today, we have a flow of basically statistically zero at our border. Do you remember when we were in this House chamber? Do you remember when we were debating legislation last year? And we were debating bills. And what did they say? They said, well, we've got to pass comprehensive immigration reform in order to solve the problem and secure the border. When it was Joe Biden as the president and Alejandro Mayorkas as the Secretary of Homeland Security, and now it turns out, somehow magically, without that being signed into law, magically, President Trump is able to stop the flow at the border. Do you think that's an accident?
No, as I recall, about 10,000 a week.
Correct.
People coming across the border illegal.
We had as many as 15,000 in a day, okay? And now we are getting far fewer than 10,000 in a month.
Secretary Mayorkas told us, President Biden told us, he could not solve that problem unless we passed legislation. We needed to, this chamber was delinquent. There was nothing that could be done until we took action. And as it has been said, we didn't need to take action. We needed a different president.
And was it not, in fact, true that under President Biden and under Alejandro Mayorkas' regime at the Department of Homeland Security, was it not true that these individuals, and you saw me reading off, by the way, a lot of the years when they had deportation orders, 2022 or previously, and was it not true that these individuals that were released into the United States were either released under parole in an abuse of law that allows for isolated cases of parole? They released thousands in block.
Tens of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands in block under parole. An abuse of the law, an illegal act, an abuse of asylum to release people into our country. And then wide open borders where people were flooding across the river. That in totality, coupled with people overstaying their visas, coupled with a, frankly, far more liberal immigration system than we should have, has resulted in all of these individuals being on the streets. None of my constituents asked for that. None of my constituents wanted illegal aliens who are violent and committing crimes on the streets of our country. President Trump is stopping it. Tom Homan is stopping it. Stephen Miller, Secretary Noem, all of the great men and women of Border Patrol and ICE, they're stopping it. Now, my question is, why? Why do our colleagues on the other side of the aisle not want to stop it? Could it be for political reasons? Could it be that they want non-Americans to be in the United States to try to transform America and to politically motivate and to politically put Democrats in power? Could that be? I don't want to be so cynical as to speculate here on the House floor, but what other motives would there be to allow dangerous individuals to pour into our communities and carry out what has been carried out?
I don't want to speculate either. I'll leave that to people that are listening and people that are thinking through the situation. You talked about things that are untrue. I want to let you know that, of course, I represent 760,000 great people, hardworking, tax-paying, America-loving individuals in South Central Pennsylvania, and I've gotten some complaints. There's some rhetoric and some claims being made about immigration and customs enforcement in Central Pennsylvania. So I talked to Immigration and Customs Enforcement today and asked them, because there were claims that enforcement officers are chasing people down the street, demanding your papers, going door to door looking for people, staking out certain activities, business activities or recreational activities to just see who would come in and ask for their papers. Representative Roy, I am proud to report what I knew inherently, that that's all a lie. That's all propaganda meant to scare people and meant to stop law enforcement from doing its job. And I'm so disgusted by the names that are men and women that wear the uniform, that make a commitment to put their lives in danger to keep everybody else safe, that they're characterized by elected officials and leaders in our community the way that you've described to me this evening. It is outrageous. It is outrageous, and not only is it outrageous, it is dangerous and it is irresponsible, and it is leading to not only the division of our country and our communities, but it is leading to people suffering injuries and worse. And that, Representative Roy, is on them.
And so the impact of illegal aliens being in our country, or frankly those that were wrongly put into our country through parole and asylum or overstaying their visas or expansive abuse of legal immigration, has a consequence, right? Sure. It has a consequence in the form of lost lives. It has a consequence in the forms of hospitals that are overflowing with individuals, particularly in Texas, but around the country, jail cells that are overflowing, schools that are overflowing. And all of that has a consequence in terms of cost and continued problems. We just last week, 2 illegal aliens suspected of being members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua were charged for allegedly weaponizing their vehicle against a Border Patrol agent in Portland. Both suspects illegally crossed the southern border under Biden, were released into the interior. The driver wound up with a rap sheet including DUI, while the passenger is linked to a shooting in a prostitution ring in Portland. That's what's happening. Now, why do I mention that here? Because we just said that President Trump was able to use current law and current authority to secure the border and stop the flow. He is currently using current law, current authority to remove illegal aliens, including the 1.5 million people here under an order of removal. I want to remind everybody of that. We just blow past that little detail. 1.5 million people are running around this country who have an order of removal from a judge. They've gone through all the processes. They've had all the frickin' lawyers that are paid by the NGOs to try to keep them out of court and keep them in the country. And 1.5 million of them have an order of deportation, of removal. So what do we do about it? And this is where I want to say, we, Congress, owe it to the President and to the great men and women of Border Patrol and ICE. We owe it to our constituents. We owe it to future Americans that could be endangered by a future administration with open borders to codify that which President Trump has been carrying out to defend our country. We owe it to all of them to pass a new and updated version of H.R. 2 that we passed in the previous Congress, because we stood on this floor as conservatives and united this conference behind a singular mission of passing laws to prevent the abuses that were being carried out by Biden and Mayorkas. Because I promise you, remember, we had a President Trump in 2020. we had a secure border in January of 2021 with low numbers of border crossings and enforcement of the law. But what happened? Biden took over, Mayorkas took over, and we had an explosion, and we had dead Americans and dangerous, lawless people on our streets. So we, Congress, have a duty to lay it all on the line and to make sure that this year, under this Congress, with a Republican majority in the House and a Republican majority in the Senate, that we deliver to the president's desk the equivalent of H.R. 2 from the previous Congress, which would codify the changes to parole, codify the changes to asylum, codify the changes in catch and release, codify the permanent and continued development of the wall, and all of the tools necessary to stop the flow at the border that the current administration has put into action. We should demand it. We should change the law so that no future Biden and Mayorkas can endanger the American people. Does the gentleman from Pennsylvania agree?
Of course I agree. And as you bring it up, I think to myself, how heartbreaking is it knowing, I look at these pictures here of these wonderful young people with their whole lives ahead of them. If we'd have been able to do that during the first administration, these five people would be alive. Likely would be alive, right?
Right.
But because we have failed here, not because Chip has failed, not because I'm not willing to vote for it, we have to get it on the floor. But let's face it, Representative Roy, the great Representative Roy from Texas, how many votes are you going to count on for Laken Riley, for Jocelyn Nungare, for any of these people? How many votes are you going to count on to keep them alive from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle?
Zero. Now, if we're lucky, we might get a handful if pushed to the brink. Remember, we got 4 or 5 of them to vote for, I think, the SAVE Act. Now, let's bring that up for a second. Should we not, in addition to guaranteeing that we secure the border and codify the great work of President Trump to prevent the death and destruction of the American people, should we not also guarantee the integrity of our elections by passing yet again the SAVE Act, pushing our Senate colleagues to pass the SAVE Act and send it to the president's desk, which would simply guarantee that only American citizens vote in American elections? It's that simple. Shouldn't be controversial. Shouldn't be a really difficult concept. We've passed it in the House. The Senate is blocking it. The question is whether Republicans have the nerve to put it on must-pass legislation, to fight for it, to break the filibuster in the Senate, to move the bill and get it to the president's desk, along with some other good changes like voter ID and other things that we should do. Does the gentleman agree that we should, in addition to codifying H.R. 2, that we should secure American elections with these requirements under the SAVE Act to save America, as President Trump rightly said, as President Trump told us in our conference meeting a week and a half ago, to get it to his desk? Do you agree?
Of course, and we passed it in the House, but ladies and gentlemen, that's not enough. That doesn't change anything. We can pass everything we want to in the House, with or without our friends on the other side of the aisle, but if we can't get a vote and passage in the Senate, it doesn't get to the president's desk. And I would just say this, what I think would be interesting to see when we talk about, look, quite honestly, it's a travesty to me that we should have to pass such a bill that only American citizens vote in American elections. That should be obvious. You don't invite some person from some other state or some other town into your home to ask them about your important family decisions, but yet somehow in America, my friends on the other side of the aisle, our colleagues over there, think that that's what we should do. But they should put a vote up in the Senate to show the American people who stands with them and who stands with letting those people in our country illegally, killing, raping, robbing, and giving them the vote. And if they can't get the vote then they need to find a way to break the filibuster and make sure that we stand up for Americans. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend from Texas, we weren't elected by people from other countries. We weren't elected by Tren de Nicaragua or the cartel of the Suns. We were elected by the American citizens, and that's who we are here to represent. If somebody wants to represent them, well, God bless them. But they should let the American people know by their votes and go out and decry it to everybody. And amazingly, in some cases, some of our colleagues actually are.
One final question, one final point. in addition to protecting Americans with the H.R. 2, to codify the president's actions, in addition to ensuring that American elections are secure and that you can trust the integrity of elections by passing the SAVE Act, voter ID, and what is necessary to guarantee the sanctity of our elections, should we not also consider something like the PAUSE Act, to pause and take a break on immigration, when in fact we legally have 1.1 million green cards, 1 million guest workers, and north of 1 million foreign students each year? We have more immigrants than every other country in the world combined. We have a foreign-born population of 51.9 million, almost 16%, a record high. And this important part, we have social welfare and social safety nets that are being used by non-citizens that are blowing out the rolls and driving up the cost of all of these goods. Now, my point here is that we've had massive amounts of immigration over our history, and all of us love the actual melting pot that America represents. But here's the key issue. You actually have to be willing to assimilate for it to be a melting pot. It's not a melting pot if you're coming here and waving a Palestinian flag or waving the flag of Honduras or Guatemala instead of saying, I'm coming here to be an American and to embrace Western civilization and to embrace the greatest country the world has ever known that has bled around the world, not for conquest, but to liberate people, that we've died for people around the globe to make it a safer and securer place. And people want to come here to be a part of that. God bless them. But the people who come here who want to change it, who want to turn it into an Islamic state, who want to undermine it, who want to advance Sharia law, who want to bring their flags and their country here instead of adopting and becoming an American, shouldn't we not take a total review of our immigration system from top to bottom, in addition to codifying security of our border and ensuring the integrity of our election, and that only citizens vote, and that only citizens are voting, and that only citizens are counted for purposes of representation and how we apportion our members of Congress? Aren't all of these things that I'm talking about common sense to ensure a simple principle that American citizens are able to run this country?
Yeah, it is their country. And of course, the United States of America, the most generous country ever in history, certainly with immigration, more generous than every other nation, more generous than all nations combined. But what no one ever envisioned was tens of thousands daily or weekly to the amount of tens of millions of people pouring into our country illegally with no interest in being American, but being in America. And now what do we do about it? We have a president that has vowed to solve that, has vowed to fix that, and he got elected on that promise. And now my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, well, they reject following the law if it means following the law. And so I think that, it's the height of disrespect, quite honestly, for people to come to our country illegally, tell us that we're awful people, try and change our country into the country they came from, have us pay for it, and then disrespect us while they're doing it by killing our citizens, while sending our tax dollars to the terrorist organization in the country that they left. Unacceptable at any and every single level.
Well, I want to thank my friend from Pennsylvania for joining me tonight. I appreciate his commentary. I appreciate his leadership. I appreciate his service in the United States military. I appreciate his service to his constituents. I appreciate his great family. It's a sacrifice for all of us, but it's tough when you have young kids, and our kids are about the same age, and you leave them at home and you come here. But we're doing it because we want to save this country for our kids and our grandkids. I know that's why I'm in public service. I know when I had a diagnosis of cancer about 14 years ago of Hodgkin's lymphoma, You know, I didn't know whether I'd be around days or weeks, and 14 years later, I'm sure some of my colleagues, you know, whatever, maybe they're happy to see me, maybe they're not, but I know that when I leave my kids, I know God gave me some more breath and some more time on this planet to try to make sure that we save this, the last great hope for mankind, as President Reagan called it. And you know, I'm just going to close with this, and I'll turn it over to our friend. I'll yield my time so my friend from North Carolina can take the floor. We're here to represent the American people. The American people did not send us here as representatives to give away our country. They did not send us here as representatives to allow our friends on the other side of the aisle to empower dangerous thugs and gang members and people that are killing Americans. They did not send us here for that. And every time we vote on an appropriations bill and every time we're putting forward legislation, we ought to be thinking about these Americans who lost their lives at the hands of these non-Americans. And we ought to be thankful that we have a president who recognizes that these non-Americans needn't be on our streets, and that we should be siding with ICE and Border Patrol, that we should be defending the men and women of our law enforcement community across the country so that we can protect these Americans, so that we can choose to side with the American citizens and not the non-Americans who are dangerous. And we can side with law enforcement to protect these. And we can act. And this is my message to my Republican colleagues. We have a choice this year. We can retreat and get into the mode of elections, or we can lead, and we can work, and we can roll our sleeves up, and right now codify the rules, the laws, the actions of the president to secure our border and ensure that no future president can abuse them. We can do that right now. We can pass H.R. 2. We can send it to the Senate. We can force the Senate to act, but we just have the will to do it. We can send the SAVE Act again. We can add voter ID. We can send it to the Senate. We can dare them to break the filibuster by forcing a talking filibuster instead of the fake filibuster of a forced 60-vote threshold. Make them work. Make 51 senators sit on the floor and have a quorum. Make them speak. Make them do their job so that we can defend our country and defend our people. Pass the SAVE Act. Pass voter ID. Secure American elections, secure our border permanently instead of just having to depend on the current president. Reform our immigration system. Pause it. Pause it. We've done it before. Pause. Review it. Stop people from overstaying their visas. Fix the system. Make sure you're not importing people who are adherent to Sharia law and want to undermine Western civilization and create mayhem and be against our way of life. Choose the path of leadership. Come here as a Congress, bind together. Don't sit around complaining about having a 2 or 3 or 4 seat majority. Lead, act, go. That's why we're here. That's why that flag exists. Put your trust in God. Put the armor of God around you. Stand up and lead for this country. And if you do it, the American people will send us back here in a bigger majority. If you do it, President Trump will be able to accomplish even more in the next 2 years than in these 2 years. But if we act now, we can actually save this country. If we act now, we can secure the border. If we act now, we can secure our elections. If we act now, we can guarantee an immigration system that no longer imports people into our country that wants to undermine it. And we can provide health care freedom, and we can balance the budget if we act and we lead. But right now, let's secure our country. We can do it this year. That is our calling. We are not here to get reelected. We are here to deliver for the American people. And with that, I will yield my time back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2020.